on these two here, I'm going to actually do the same thing, but I'm going to solve them. Before I can do anything with either one of these, I've got to make sure that this number here in front of the x squares are ones. That's the only way we can use completing the square. So in order for this to be a 1, I would have to divide it by 2. But remember, whatever you do to one thing in an equation, you have to do to everything. So I have to divide everything in that equation by 2. So when I divide everything by 2, I have x squared plus 14x equals negative 20. This was the original c. Just like up here, we had the plus 3 and the plus 14. And then we had to move those over to the other side. This has already been moving to the other side for us. So now we need to make room for that new c that we're going to find and we're going to add. And whatever we add to one side of an equation, we have to add to the other. So we're going to take our b, we're going to divide it by 2, and we're going to square it. So 14 divided by 2 is 7. 7 squared is 49. So I'm going to insert that into those two blank spaces. So when I do that, I will have x squared plus 14x plus 49 equals negative 20 plus 49. This can then be factored now because originally it couldn't. So that would be x plus 7, x plus 7, because 7 times 7 is 49, and 7 plus 7 is 14. And then over here I have negative 20 plus 49, which is 29. So now this can be written one time and squared since there's 2 of them, and that's going to equal 29. Now what we're actually going to do is we're going to solve this. So we're going to try to figure out what x equals. So the first step is to get rid of this square because I can't move anything inside this parenthesis until that square is gone. And remember, anytime we solve an equation, we are looking to use the opposite operation. The opposite of squaring something is square rooting. So I'm going to have to square root in order to get rid of that square. But whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So I'm going to have to square root the other side as well. So the square root and the square cancel each other out so that you're just left with the x plus 7. We do not know the square root of 29. You know that because if you plugged it into a calculator, it would give you a decimal. So anytime you put the square root of a number and you get a decimal, that means that you don't know the square root of that number. So we're just going to leave that the square root of 29. Our last step to get this x by itself is to move this 7 to the other side. Opposite of adding 7 is subtracting 7. So x equals, now this has a square root around it and this doesn't. So that means we cannot combine these together. So I'm going to show you how you write this. So you first write that negative 7. This is a positive square root, so you put plus and then you put the square root of 29. So that would be how your final answer would be written. That's what x equals. Let's look at this last example. Again, in order to use completing the square, this has to be a 1. In order for that to be a 1, we have to divide it by 6. Whatever you do to one part of an equation, you have to do to the others. So we're going to have to divide everything by 6. So when we divide by 6, we will have x squared minus 6x equals negative 9. Again, they've already moved this negative 9 over. That's like, again, this 3 and this 14 that we had to move over. They've already moved that negative 9 over for us. So we're going to make room for the new c that we're going to find. And whatever we do to one side of an equation, we have to do to the other. So we're going to take our b, we're going to divide it by 2, and then we're going to square it. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 squared is 9, and we're going to insert that into those two places there, okay? So we've got x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals negative 9 plus 9. So now this is factorable, so we can factor it into x minus 3 and x minus 3, because negative 3 times negative 3 is 9, and negative 3 plus negative 3 is negative 6. And then over here, negative 9 plus 9 is just 0. So now that we have that factored, and because the same thing is in both parentheses, I can rewrite it once and put squared and equal to 0. Now I'm going to solve it. So again, before I can do anything inside the parenthesis, I have to get rid of what's outside. The opposite of squaring something is square rooting. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So the square root and the square cancel, so I'm left with x minus 3. And the square root of 0, if you plug that into a calculator, it'll tell you that it's just 0. So now our last step is just to add 3. So x equals 3 is our final answer on this one. We can do this same process with these if we wanted to. So if they wanted you to solve this, not just factor it, you would square root and then subtract 3, and you would have an answer that looks very similar to this one. Same thing on this problem here. If they wanted us to solve this, the opposite of squaring something would be to square root it, and then we would add 5, and again, your answer would look very similar to this one. I hope this helps you get through the assignment that I have listed in Google Classroom for this lesson. Remember to meet me in our video conference at 2 o'clock tomorrow if you are having any problems with it. See you guys then. Bye.